Samantha B. Hope you like our show's new look. TBS said, give that old battle axe a facelift. We're sick of looking at her. I assume they were talking about the set. So, guys, we're 55 days from the midterm elections, and one phrase is on every pundit's lips.
Blue wave. Blue wave.
We have a blue wave coming in the House. Democrats will take over the House in November. I actually think that Democrats have a real chance of taking back the Senate.
The House and the Senate? Lady, there's no guarantee the Democrats could successfully take back a shopping cart. Blue wave or no blue wave, American voters mostly agree with Democrats. 97% of Americans want some form of gun control. 62% of Americans want the government to protect the environment better. 75% of Americans say immigration is a good thing. And 100% of Americans believe that hot dogs belong in the crusts of pizzas, and if the Italians don't like it, they can suck it. And yet, the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House, not to mention both chambers and the governor's office in 26 states, plus up to 25% of the Baldwin brothers. We are talking about a lot of power here. That is no coincidence. Republicans have put a lot of strategies in place to stay in power, even when they're in the minority, like voter suppression, such as this recent very brazen attempt in Georgia.
Election officials in Georgia County will vote this morning on a controversial proposal to close 7 of its 9 voting places. Many community members say that would hurt African-American voters.
They tried to close down 7 of 9 polling places? The only reason they didn't close down the other 2 is because they were located inside a Jimmy Buffett concert where black people could never find them. Gee, I wonder why they wanted to close polling places in a predominantly black county. Couldn't be to prevent the election of America's first black woman governor, could it?
A now fired consultant had recommended the closures because he said the precincts were not in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
You know what else is going to make it hard for disabled people to vote? Not having a polling place. Don't blame disabled people for your racism. That is mean in about 6 different ways. The most shocking thing about this was that for once it didn't work. The county election board voted down the proposal and the polling places will remain open. But in a lot of places, it's left to the courts to decide, and the GOP has been hard at work taking over those too. I'm sure you remember how they successfully bench-blocked judicial gnome Merrick Garland and placed Buffy villain Neil Gorsuch on the Supreme Court. But what you may not know is that they've been doing that at every level of the judicial system. Republicans in the Senate blocked so many of Obama's judicial nominees that they created 107 big, juicy holes for Donald Trump to fill. The nausea you're experiencing from hearing me say big, juicy holes for Donald Trump to fill is exactly how you should feel, because stacking the courts with conservatives is deeply ominous for voting rights. As just one example, the Supreme Court recently ruled 5-4, including Gorsuch, that Ohio could purge its voting rolls of inactive voters. That means every other state can too.
We are gonna purge today.
Not that kind of purge, Florida. Don't get excited. But the pièce de résistance, and the main reason why Republicans don't need anyone to agree with them to win elections, is gerrymandering. In 2010, Republicans took advantage of the census year to go all in on gerrymandering, drawing districts so skewed that North Carolina looked like the aneurysm I have every time I think about the year 2010. As David Daley lays out in his book, Rat Fucked, the Republicans' plan was the brainchild of Republican operative Chris Jankowski. If you haven't heard of him, he's basically Karl Rove without all that smoldering sex appeal. Jankowski created a project called Red Map, and buckle up because it is as terrifying as it is boring.
What is Red Map?
Red Map is a strategic plan to pool money on the national level and invest it into the key state legislative races where there was going to be a redrawing of congressional lines based on the census data, and focusing on the states that were either going to lose a congressional seat or gain a congressional seat to have maximum impact.
Oh God, I had a terrible dream that a talking sports jacket broke democracy. Oh my God, it was real. In order to redraw redistricting maps in their favor, Republicans targeted a few key state legislature seats that had never really faced large amounts of campaign cash before, poured a ton of money into them, and buried Democratic incumbents using negative ads like this one, which some say portrayed State Senator Margaret Dixon as a prostitute.
Margaret Dixon.
Not once, not twice, but 3 times busted. Special deals, insider trading, no bid state contracts, all for her own gain. What does Margaret Dixon really care about?
To be fair, that ad is not showing her as a prostitute. She's clearly leaving the money. That makes her the John. And it worked. Republicans won all the races they needed to control key states' redistricting, which led to the most gerrymandered districts in history. Republicans crammed as many Democrats as possible into as few districts as possible, locking in GOP majorities for close to a decade. Bottom line, Republican votes actually count more, and they lost whatever incentive they had to work with the other side. But don't worry, Chris doesn't feel bad or anything.
Do you have any regrets for something that you helped to create?
No, I just don't.
Trump is president, Nazis are back, que sera, sera. Because of all their judicial theft, gerrymandering, and vote suppressing, Republicans have made seemingly competitive races almost impossible to win. In 2012, Democrats got over 1 million more votes, but Republicans won a 33-seat advantage in the House, and the situation is still dire. In fact, the districts are so skewed that according to the Brennan Center, in order to take back the House, Democrats would need to turn out 15 million more voters than they did at the last midterms. 15 million! Where are they gonna find those kinds of numbers? Oh, hang on a sec. According to USA Today, 15 million people played Pokemon Go in 2016. I know what Democrats have to do!
Pokemon go to the polls.
My God! That try-hard robot was right all along. We have to Pokemon go to the polls, and Pokemon register new voters, and Pokemon one more thing I'll tell you about after the break.